All right, it's a special treat for us to be introducing Mika Brzezinski, who's here to discuss her new book, Obsessed, America's Food Addiction and My Own. We didn't exactly plan for this week to be a nutrition week here at P&P, but some of you may be aware that just the other day, we also hosted a visit by Michelle Obama, who came here to discuss food and gardening. And it's really great to have such prominent people writing and talking about sensible and smart approaches to food. For those of you who have watched Mika in her regular role as co-host of MSNBC's Morning Joe, you already know that healthy eating has been one of her signature issues. In fact, their act is going to start anytime now. In fact, she and co-host Joe Scarborough, who you can see is also here with us, have had this act.
It's me right here. You don't realize it's the act already started.
This actor, he plays the undisciplined food slob, and she plays...
How am I doing? Pretty good? Did I play the role well?
The obsessive health nut.
Oh.
But as Mika reveals in her very courageous and very honest new book, there's been much more to her personal story with food. Now, you look at Mika, attractive and fit, and you may say to yourself, well, what does she have to worry about food? And that's actually why the message that she, of all people, conveys in her book is especially significant. She's saying that America's food addiction has affected even her life, one in which she secretly endured repeated cycles of binge eating, purging, and over-exercising. And she's found a very compelling way in the book, not only to address her own demons, but to help work through those of a longtime best friend and fellow TV journalist, Diane Smith, who herself has struggled with weight issues and teamed with Mika in writing the book. Also understand that Joe has both supported Mika's efforts and himself trimmed his weight and become healthier.
That's a lie.
Mika has dedicated Obsessed to her two teenage daughters, hoping they don't have the food-obsessed life that she has had. And I think those of you who face similar food traumas will be motivated and inspired by the book. And those of you who don't think that you have food issues may discover that you do, or can, at least after reading the book, end up relating better to those around you who have such issues. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough.
So first of all, let me just say I've got a confession to make. I too am obsessed with over-exercising, and I'm working on it right now. So to let you know, because a lot of people early on asked, what in the world does Mika Brzezinski know about being obsessed with food and obsessed with her weight? It is a sickness, and we've seen this, and it is so funny. Keep that baby away from her, by the way. She will not give it back. She just won't. So you may ask, oh, baby. The baby wants to eat. She's depriving the baby of eating. All right. Okay. Boy. Yeah. That didn't work out well. In Philadelphia, we had a baby on stage for 30 minutes. So, Mika, stand up because you had a question you wanted to start with. To let you know how obsessed she is and how she's been doing this since she was 16 or 17, ask him the question, because she wanted the baby. You thought she wanted the baby because she loves babies. No, she wanted the baby as a prop to cover her up as she was talking. So that's the question.
What do we always ask? Our friends, our husbands, does this make me look fat? So I know. It's not right.
So she was trying to figure out all the way over here. She goes, am I fat in this? I picked up 15 pounds. Do I look fat in this? And I'm like, you're obsessed.
Yes.
You are.
That's why I wrote the book.
So talk about the book.
Well, the book is inspiration out of a conversation with a best friend, but actually a story that I think I've been wanting to tell for a long time, wanting to sort of not have to live with anymore alone. And that is that there's sort of a struggle that I think women in my industry and women who feel like they have to make it look very easy to be a certain size and feel that that's a requirement in life for success. I found myself just at 45 years old, hungry all the time and successful at what I was trying to accomplish, but kind of dead inside. And my friend and I had a conversation, even though we had known each other for so long and known each other so well and shared so much, but we had a conversation.
You two had a baby together.
We had a baby together. My second...
I bet you didn't know that, did you, about Mika?
My second child was born. My husband was on a business trip, and I actually said to her, you know, if he's not around when the baby comes, could you come to the hospital? And so she did. And then the doctor, you know, my husband, he was out of town. The doctor went to go order a pizza. So she caught my baby. We shared everything. And yet, over the course of our friendship, which is more than 15 years at the time, we had never talked about the fact that she had gained 100 pounds. And the more I thought about what friendship is, I struggle with the fact that I couldn't talk to her about this and help her. Because if a friend has cancer, or if a friend has some other condition, serious condition, wouldn't you help your friend? Wouldn't you talk to your friend about it? Wouldn't you think of ways to make their life easier and help them become healthy again? And yet we never talked about this. And then I think the frustration is that we judge people who struggle with obesity. And it turns out in that conversation, not only did I kind of talk to her very frankly about my concerns, she talked to me about hers. And hers was that I was so skinny and so hungry all the time. And it turned out, even though we were on opposite ends of the physical spectrum, we had so much in common.
And that was a constant obsession with food for different reasons. But you were, and by the way, I've just got to say this up front. If you are around Mika most of the time, or at least before she wrote this book, you really would think that all she does is eat like leaves and nuts. and we thought it was unhealthy. And I remember Chris Licht and I, our first EP for the show, were going across the country. We were in Orange County, of all places. We had been on this 10 or 15 city tour for something related to the show.
Getting up at 1 a.m. to host the show.
Yeah, getting up at 1 a.m. And we're in Orange County, and, you know, I'm not a discriminating eater. You put it in front of me, I eat it. Well, this day, we sit down, we give a speech for lunch, and I'm looking at this plate, and I turn to Mika, and I go, my God, even I wouldn't eat this. It was
breaded chicken,
breaded rubber
around
chicken,
cheese,
yeah.
Risotto surrounded by cheese, French fries, and chocolate cake.
So I turn... And I'm talking to Chris. I turn
30
back 30 seconds later, and Mika's like down on the plate licking it. And her defenses were down. And it's so, I swear, we had hosted the show for 4 years. It's the first time I realized she didn't like food. She loved food. And we saw this happen time and time again. It was this obsession with food.
The Schieffer Symposium?
We went down to Bob Schieffer's symposium down in Texas. He has it once a year. We're leaving, and again, it's another one of these horrible long days. We have a lot of them, but we had one after another. We're driving through Dallas, and Lewis and I think there's a raccoon in the back seat. We turn around, and it ends up they had given us these big tins
Mexican food for
of
$5.
Mexican food for $5, and we hear, I promise you, we turn on the light, and Mika has enchiladas all over her face. She had, without really even consciously thinking about it, she had eaten all of the enchiladas for $5, was licking up the tin foil. We turn on the light, and she goes, we caught the raccoon, but so that's why it's the first time I realized you had this obsession, and you said you had it when you were 15, 16, 17. And as you talked to Diane in the boat, because at first she lashed out at you, what do you know, Twiggy, about what I'm going through? And when you guys started to talk, you realize that you all had the same thing in common. It was you thought about food all the time. She thought about it all the time for different reasons, but you all were both obsessed. So you made a deal with each other.
Oh, we did. The deal was that she said you ought to write a book. People have no idea about this, about you, and it would help them. She goes, I know so many young women who struggle this way, but nobody wants to talk about it, and I was embarrassed. It's why I never had. I'm from a wonderful family, and quite frankly, I thought they would think I was just not only out of my mind, but what's the word that my family would use? Perhaps I would think they'd think I'm just kind of talking about something that's not important. And Diane said, you really need to write this. You would help a lot of people. And then I had kind of an idea, and I said, well, why don't you work on it with me? And you can help me as we collaborate and collect research on this. Maybe you can write a chapter in it. I'll pay you. But here's the deal. I will pay you to help me with this, but the other half of this deal is you have to lose 75 pounds. And you have to do it.
By the way, she tried that with me 10 years ago, and it hasn't worked yet.
You have to do it by the time this book comes out so that you have a story to tell. And I don't care how you do it, as long as it's healthy and it's the right thing for you. And the money I give you should help cover the cost of that. And it did. It was a lot of different efforts for her, because at this point, I think when people are climbing back from obesity, it is almost impossible. And we'll talk about that coming up, how the chips are really stacked against you. So she went to nutritionists, to doctors, to trainers. She had a hip replacement in the middle of it all. And literally this week, on the scale, is 75 pounds lighter.
And she says she's going to lose another 25.
Another 25. She's going to go for 100. And
she's unbelievable.
You know, we agreed that's probably a good place for her. It'll be a good set
But
point.
there was another deal, and Mika talks about set point all the time. What's your set point? It's what you should weigh. Not what society thinks you should weigh, not
what you want to weigh.
You've looked at, Barbie dolls growing up thinking that's what the image of yourself should be. So there was two parts to this deal. Diane was going to lose 75 pounds, and then she turned it on Mika and said, but you're going to gain 15. And for you, that was like, what, 15 pounds? That's like 50% weight increase for you. But you were at 118 when you started this project, when you were living a miserable existence. What do you weigh today?
I think it's anywhere between 133 and 135.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she's picked up.
Everything's a little tight.
And she does constantly ask, do I look fat? Do I look fat? Do I look fat?
Well,
Does this make me look fat?
And that's a great point, actually. There's a serious part to that, because the other part of the deal was that I should be okay with it. Because women who struggle with eating disorders are never okay with the way they look, ever. So a good day for me is to eat, to enjoy myself, maybe to have something not at a normal time, and to go to bed at night not thinking about what I ate and not loathing myself. And I was either contorting myself to look a way that was absolutely impossible and making it happen, 118 pounds, trying to look like a supermodel or something, or I was starving all the time, or I was exercising all the time. That's basically what I've done with 30 years. And on the side, I've had a career in education and some children. And I would like to have focused more on the important things, and I mean in the pleasure center of my brain. I feel that my family is strong. My education, God bless my parents, tried to get me educated while I was struggling with all this.
And her mother goes, Mika was very difficult.
Yes.
A terrible student. Undisciplined.
Very undisciplined. I think the important thing about saying, do I look fat, or loathing yourself, is that you're missing out on the moments of your life, because you're sitting there thinking about something that's impossible. And so, yes, I do ask myself that question. Do I look fat? But I shouldn't.
Which brings us again to part of your obsession. Everybody here knows about your father. A man who the first time he was on, tough guy. First time he was on Morning Joe, he looked at me and he said, you are stunningly superficial.
And that's what they did.
And
that was actually good news. I was worried it would be
Son
worse.
of a bitch.
Yeah.
Hey, that was unnecessary. That was unnecessary. And so Politics and Prose has a special place in our heart because, you know, I met Dr. Brzezinski about a month later. I met Ian at Tim Russard's house in 2007. The Republican, the black sheep of the family. Yeah. And I met him at Tim Russard's house for a Christmas party. I said, you know, your sister's fantastic. She's just intuitively one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. Met a lot of smart people. He cut me off because, you know, Mika had the lowest SAT score in the history of Williams College. And so we're thinking, these are just all awful people, these Brzezinskis. They're so mean. Mika's first book tour, we came here at the end of the book tour. It was the swan song. Mrs. Brzezinski, I think it's a good idea. Let's invite her over. One of them has to be nice. You just figure luck of the draw, right? One of them has to be nice. We invite Mrs. Brzezinski up, and I say, this book's dedicated to you, Mrs. Brzezinski. Tell us something about your daughter that we don't know. And so she's right there. I hand her the mic, and she stands up and she goes, I got it. You know, Mika had the lowest SAT score in the history of Williams College. They're all terrible people. But my parents are worse. When I told my dad I was running against a 16-year incumbent named Earl Hutto, he said, well, that's great, Joey, but I'm voting for Earl. So I think my mom may have voted for me. I'm not sure. But people eat for different reasons, Mika, and I'm just wondering because it's a recurring theme with you, and it's not false modesty. You always felt stupid in your family because your dad brilliant, your mother a brilliant artist, both of your brothers, I mean, one's an ambassador to Sweden now, they got doctorates, and you know, like I said, I think you're extraordinarily intuitive, but you always felt inadequate. And you've said before that sometimes you ate because you felt like the food was the only thing that, even though your parents loved you, you felt inadequate, and that was your emotional release.
Well, that's a very good way of putting it. And I think every woman, especially who suffers with eating disorders, gets to that place in a different way. And you don't have to be from a difficult family or have a troubled background or come from poverty or whatever it is. Any angle gets you there because I think actually the food is laced with ingredients that make sure you get there.
Let's talk. Okay.
But you know, my dad using the word stunningly superficial, actually that's the word I was searching for before when I talked about being embarrassed about this. And that embarrassment actually led to more extreme behavior because in my family and with all the incredible opportunities that I was surrounded with growing up, I still didn't feel like I measured up. And somehow food answered that immediately and then caused an even more difficult problem, which was how to get rid of it. And I spent most of my life trying to figure out how to please the appetite, but make sure the body doesn't show what the appetite has caused.
By the way, let's talk really quickly. Because you talk about your family, a tough family, but a really loving family.
Very loving. In fact, there's a woman in the audience who knows my family. Is that Trudy? Yeah. Hello.
It better be if you're calling somebody.
She ran my dad's office.
Did she really?
For decades. Yes.
Did he ever call you stunningly superficial?
Never. Trudy, it's so good to see you.
He wasn't there. You were in charge.
She actually, that's true. He wouldn't dare with Trudy. He wouldn't.
Well, no, I mean he's a lovely man. He doesn't play a lovely man on television, but he actually is, and we do find that all over the country, wherever we go, people come up and say, your father taught us at Columbia, taught me at Columbia, and he was the most loving, wonderful instructor.
Trudy can attest because she watched me grow up. Literally, she's known me since I was a tiny little girl.
Yeah.
That I have an incredibly loving family.
Yeah.
There's, and
great opportunities too. Like, you had Deng Xiaoping for dinner.
Well, we did.
And as David Letterman said, that must have been delicious.
He loves that. He loves that. He couldn't get. He wishes he thought of it himself.
It's a great line.
It's a good line. It's
what happened?
Letterman's line.
Tell everybody really quickly. Tell everybody. It's 1978. We have an opening to China. Mika's dad ran U.S. foreign policy for 4 years. My dad ran Little League baseball teams for 40 years. So this is all pretty amazing to me. But when China opened normalized relations with the United States, instead of a state dinner, They went to your house.
which is a big mistake.
How did that turn out?
Not well. As Trudy can attest, there's a lot of stress in our house before these big dinners because my mother wouldn't hire caterers and whatever Washington women do. She'd like shoot the deer, drag it home, cook it. That's if she didn't find it on the side of the road. And we would all work the party, take the coats, hand out the cocktails, and serve the dinner. And of course, I tripped nervously at, I don't know how old I was, let's say really young, and like just splatted caviar on Deng Xiaoping's crotch. But
And then things got worse from there. What did you do next?
Well, what do you do when you spill something? You want to clean it up.
So Mika was leaning over the
can't
great
say
leader,
that
wiping his
story.
crotch, trying to get the
Trudy,
caviar
don't
there.
tell my dad I told that story, please. He's
Cyrus
really
Vance,
tired of it.
horrified, and that's really where the split between Dr. Brzezinski and Cyrus Vance started.
I think maybe.
Right
Actually,
there.
that might be true.
I think it may be.
So-
Yeah, you all had dinner with Pope John Paul II. That
Yes,
was
we
big.
did.
That had to be huge.
It was amazing.
What happened there? Was
well,
that
it was
smooth?
awkward. No, it was not smooth.
Really?
We did not host that. Thank God. Yeah. Thank God.
Talking about the Pope, obviously.
No, it happened at I think the British Embassy, and my brothers didn't want to go. Ian wanted to go to the Langley High School football game and complained. And after my mother dragged all three of us there, teens at this point, Ian showed up in Timberland boots that were like untied and ripped jeans. And then, okay, we get through that awkwardness and we sit down for dinner. And I believe my mom challenged him on the issue of birth control and the role of women in the Catholic Church.
That would be what Mushka does.
It was an upbringing that prepared me for the set of Morning Joe every morning. It's easy now after growing up Brzezinski. So, no.
So you had obviously extraordinary opportunities. Even with these opportunities, there were challenges. And it seems to me, like you said, regardless of your background and your upbringing, you can have an obsession. You can have this food obsession that follows you. And you also talk about in this book, and when you started writing this, other people weren't talking about this.
No.
But you dared to go around telling people that food was addictive. It was purposefully addictive, and you got a lot of pushback. But now, of course, we have.
Its timing is really
Yeah.
good. Listen, the ingredients in most of the food we eat, to use the right words, I think has addictive qualities, and some believe actually do cause addictive behavior, or would go as far as to say the word addiction. And it's because, for example, it's because, for example, the studies that we cite in the book through Yale and the University of Michigan and other places which have been studying this issue for decades, food addiction and certain ingredients causing obesity, they actually in one study did brain scans. And when they looked at how the brain pleasure center responds to salt, sugars, and fats, it lit up the same way it would to cocaine. And if you look at now, you go to a grocery store and you try and put together a meal, you can't. You can't unless you go and grow everything. You can't find a meal that doesn't have too overly abundant amounts of salt, sugar, or fat. And so if you eat that every day for weeks and months and years, chances are you're going... Does anyone here ever remember having one potato chip? Or how about five?
I remember having one bag of
That's
potato
right.
chips
And not a small one.
when I was 6. Not
So
a small one. Yeah,
take
but
that example as to how your mouth responds to potato chips and now start broadening it out. And it's amazing what you'll find yourself eating every day and every week in the meals that you cook for yourself, or the amounts of food on your plate that you go for as opposed to the foods you should be eating.
so
Has anyone stuffed broccoli down their throat and just, wanted to have 20 more spears of broccoli? I don't think so. But, you can, by the way, the book just has some solutions from experts. You can retrain your body and your taste buds to eat better. But you have to know these things first.
So
about the food
Michael
you eat.
Moss has been on the show a couple of times.
He's an
and
award-winning journalist.
Once you started writing this, an award-winning New York Times investigative reporter, he wrote a book called Salt, Sugar, and Fat, which, by the way, that's my food pyramid, by the way. It's the base of my food pyramid. Fats and oils as you go up higher. But he talks specifically about how the food industry has engineers and they engineer it, and they spend millions and millions of dollars to make sure that you just can't eat one. And it's happening more and more. And I was talking about when he was on the show a couple of days ago, you can go to some grocery stores and they will give you a scanner where you can go around and scan food, right? And you're thinking that's really convenient and that's great, but you know what they do with that information? They trace where you go, where you stop, and they figure out the paths that you take through there. They send it in to corporate headquarters, and then they have people who calculate out where's the best place to put the most addictive food, and it's just part of the process.
So in the book, we addressed that. Diane and I realized that we did some of the same things, and we were caught up in the same sort of generation of bad eating. There was at one point we were talking together and we realized at the same time, I think I was a senior in college and she was just starting out as an anchor in Syracuse, New York. And we both, for a good time on a Saturday night, would drive to our local Price Chopper. Mine was in North Adams, Massachusetts, 20 minutes from Williams College. Everyone else is out at parties. And I'd go to the Price Chopper and I would fill my basket with Entenmann's cookies, whatever, ice cream, cereal, Captain Crunch. And my idea of a good time was to sit and kind of eat all night. And that's really embarrassing. I do think my parents would call that stunningly superficial. But I felt like that. I felt sort of sick over myself and over what this secret was. But I kept doing it, and it's not something that was easily put away. And while I was able to keep my weight under control, I don't think I did it in a healthy way. And I think I spent much of my life somewhat on the edge of unhealthy, either mentally or physically. And writing this book was one way of calling myself out and trying to stop.
So let's open it up for questions in a minute. But I want to ask you how you're doing now. You've picked up about 20 pounds.
Mm-hmm. Not so, yeah.
Maybe 30, maybe 50.
Okay, that's great. And it looks good, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
But can you talk about, because we've all noticed it, everybody that works with you, your family's noticed it, how much happier you are now, and how at work, at home, on weekends, what a difference it's made in your life. You've got to hit yourself all the time. Hold on, I'm fine. Just like you did ask, am I fat? Am I fat?
Well,
am I
look,
fat?
I'm standing in front of 300 people. So, I mean, I think it's okay to start fall back a little bit and be insecure. But I will say I am happier. I am so much happier. I want to put this stuff behind me, and I want to actually enjoy this incredible life that I have. And I haven't really been able to do that. And one of the things that was so frustrating is that I felt like I was living a lie. I felt like I wasn't telling people the truth about exactly why I looked the way I looked. And I have to tell you, it was very confusing. I spent much of my career finding success when I was 118 pounds and not having success when I wasn't. So this is...
Well, give the specific example. You go to a network vice president. You interview with a network vice president. She tells you you've got great credentials.
But you kind of look like a mess, and you should go drink some water or something. Like, lose 10 pounds, come back in 6 months, and we'll talk. And, I'm trying to be nice, Mika. I'm trying to help you out. This is television. And, on television, there is a certain, weight that the camera adds. Here's the thing.
I'm living proof of that.
Yeah.
And by the way, it adds about 80 pounds, by the way.
So here's the thing. Every time I was very, very thin and on TV and some of these jobs I got so much positive reinforcement. You look amazing. You're so thin. You're like a model. I can't believe you have kids. It was as if I had accomplished something. And the secret, or the sort of sick twist to it, was that I was pretending it was so easy. Meanwhile, while they weren't looking, I was out running 12 miles a day and hungry all the time. I did lose 10 pounds, and I went back 6 months later, and I got a job. So it's not just me being a little bit, on the edge of eating disorder where you are lying to yourself about what reality is. The reality is that women are appreciated when they look extremely thin, and told that.
And it's not just television, because you obviously television. It's a visual medium. You're here in front of 350 people, But also, and I noticed this, and we've talked about this before, with my daughter. I've got 3 boys, and you got boys. Boys are like dogs. They're easy to raise. I started noticing, though, with Kate, I started noticing early on, she'd go in the bathtub, she'd have the Barbies, and of course, take the Barbie clothes off, and you'd see all these Barbies around, and anatomically, they're freaks. Yeah. They're absolute freaks, and these are the images, the first images girls get of how they're supposed to look, and they carry this throughout life. Kate's now at an age where she's 9, almost 10, and suddenly it matters what boys in the class think of her, and so suddenly... it's such an early age. Young girls are bombarded.
I had a Barbie.
With
I wasn't allowed to have them, but I got one, and I was like, okay, I am going to look like that. And I spent most of my time trying to make myself look like that.
Why weren't you allowed to have a Barbie?
My parents didn't believe in plastic toys.
They're crazy.
Right, Trudy? No. Seriously, they thought they were stunningly superficial.
Yeah.
They did.
So I'm intellectually on par with Barbie. That's great. A plastic Barbie doll. Great. So, I'm going to enjoy having your father on the show tomorrow morning.
That's going to be great. I'm going to take the day off.
Yeah.
Why don't we open it up?
Yeah, let's open it up for questions, and you can ask questions about anything, food,
we can broaden it out to politics.
Alabama football, politics, morning show, whatever you want. Yes, sir.
Am I on the air here?
Right, they want us to.
Great to see you, Mika. I feel as if I've known you and Joe all my life because I have breakfast with you every morning.
Thank you.
I'm asleep at 6 a.m., but by starting about 7 to 9.
So are we.
I'm with you, and I'm a great admirer of your father. I was in the State Department forever, and he's really needed now. Everybody in this room should get Time Magazine and read how he makes clear something that's total chaos to the rest of
We'll be talking about that article tomorrow morning with him.
I will get up. I might get up at 6. Don't count on it. I have a question about food and eating that I've never heard anybody address, and I hope it's in your book, but I don't know. I'm over 35, and I see some people in the room here that were, like me, alive during the Second World War. I was in Washington, and I was scolded by my mother. Clean your plate. Right. Yeah. Think of all the starving people in Europe, in Armenia, name it.
I got that too from my mother.
So now we're in Washington, D.C. I don't go to steakhouses, but you go to any restaurant, and they're competitive, so they lay it on.
Right.
I am psychologically unable to push food away that goes into the dumpster, and I hope the poor starving people
we do address this in the book.
My dumpster, but I don't do that. Why don't you address that?
Well, we do. It's in the book, and there's a couple of different experts we talk to because the foods now that are on the plates that we eat also make you unable to stop. So, and the portion sizes are too big, and the environment, this amount of salt and sugar and fat, but that are put into the foods that you eat that you wouldn't even know are there. It's stunning, and you wonder why 5 or 10 pounds goes on. Look at how many times you went out during those few months or whatever, because that's it too. But absolutely, I think, first of all, the body is designed to eat as much as it can and as much as possible for those times when food is not available. But look at us now. There's food everywhere. You can get food within 30 seconds for the most part. Obviously, there are food deserts in some parts of the country where you can't get healthy food, another problem. But the issue that you're talking about comes down to a philosophical mindset that came during the war, but also is built into our human nature. Right. And now we have an overabundance of food, a lot of unhealthy food. It's a bad mess.
Well, built into our human nature also, your mother obviously went through what my grandmother went through, which was the Great Depression. Exactly. My grandmother, grandfather, we never were able to leave any food on the table because we heard about the Great Depression and obviously rationing during the war. And there's another part of this, though. It's the portion sizes are larger, and after you ate everything on your plate, you went out and ran. You went out on a bike. You went out and played. I say this to Mika all the time. My mom was not exactly obsessed with food. I would have Captain Crunch our Trix, our Frosted Flakes. I would eat it all the time. I would have hamburgers. I would have fries. I have everything that you like in the sunlight that you would like junk food junkie be eating, in your room. A Big Mac, but I burned it off. I know it's hard to believe because you actually watched me on TV. I was the skinniest guy in the world for a very long time, and it's because we exercise. Our kids now sit at home and play video games. It's pathetic. And so there's two parts of this equation, and I really think I agree with you. We've got to focus on food. We also have to focus on exercise. We've got John Kennedy pushed fitness in schools. We have got to get back to that. It's absolutely critical. Yes, ma'am.
It's a good segue. I think I come from an Eastern European Jewish family, child of Holocaust survivors, and it's always been both a cultural thing that you offer a lot of food. If people don't take it, it's insult. It was just a big thing in the home. Food was always an issue, and I always had problems. And it was only 10 years ago, and I've lost 100 pounds when I. Well, but I just decided that it can't be so emotional, and I also cut out meat, any desserts, et cetera.
Literally changed the way
any
you
carbs,
eat forever.
any bagel. I mean, there's certain foods that were always emotional for me. I cannot eat a piece of chocolate because I can't eat one piece. But the issue of portions and the issue of culture that it nurtures, because a lot of ethnic cultures also offer that. What are you doing differently with your kids, or what can we tell
I have a chapter in the book on how. Oh, Secretary Vilsack's here. Okay, great. Where is he? Tell him to come on up. I actually have a chapter in the book that addresses what to say and what not to say to your children, because I think it's a minefield for mothers on how to talk to your daughters, especially. And I don't know how many times I've heard someone say to somebody, "Don't say that to her; she'll get an eating disorder," or "Don't say that to her; she'll do this," or what do you say? So we have an actual, I lay it out like a graphic. Here's what they hear when you say this, and here's what you should say instead. Because you can say, you're eating too much of that. What your child hears, I'm fat, I'm disgusting, I'm this, I'm that. And so it helps understand exactly how you can communicate with your kids. And it's about talking to them about it, not at the time that they're doing it, which is one of the key pieces of information, because you immediately instill that guilt. So we address that, but also in terms of what you were saying about being from Eastern Europe and the way you have to clean your plate. I was too.
Pierogi,
the problem is our
kielbasa.
plates are too full.
Yeah.
And I'd suggest you don't put so much food on it. Say, no, thank you, I'm not going to have
Or
that
I'd
much.
say doggy bags. I mean, you can go in and they
Exactly.
give you a big portion. And
Congratulations
eat it the next
on
day.
losing 100 pounds.
That's fantastic.
amazing.
Mika, one other thing that it's very interesting story that as you were writing this book, talking about what you say to your girls.
Yes.
Remember, we had discussions about how you were so uptight about eating that it actually started to impact them. And we actually had to talk about, you're going to go home and you're
Eat a
going to eat a pizza with your daughters and not be quite
Not
so
mangle
tightly
the food
controlled.
or hide it or put it somewhere or don't eat it. You know what? It's not the end of the world. Okay, that's for my condition or whatever you want to put it. My issue is easing up a little bit, relaxing a little bit. You know what? Go up 2 dress sizes. It's not that big a deal, which I did, and I think it's been great for my family. And it's actually opened up a discussion that we really needed to have with 2 teenage girls.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Mika.
Hi! Oh my God!
I wouldn't miss it for.
Madame, bonjour, comment ça va?
Ça va bien, Mika. Ça va bien.
My French teacher. Isn't she beautiful? I always thought she was beautiful.
Well, I want to share with people something about you.
Oh, boy.
Because the way you are talking, and I read just like before, just few lines, and I've known you as a teenager very well. You were every day in my classroom, right? And never, ever would have I suspected that you had an issue with food, because you were very sportive and you were thin. You were absolutely by any stretch of imagination. So when does this idea?
Oh, this is great. So my French teacher, I was a sophomore. I would go to class with you, and I would try so hard to concentrate, and you were so animated that it was hard not to. But I found a way, because this is what my day would be like, going to the Madeira School, which is just an incredible school, and I'm so lucky to have been able to have that experience. I would go to the 7-Eleven near my house on Old Dominion Road, and I would have pizza in a pocket for breakfast, even though my mother made me a great breakfast. Okay?
I'm not going to lie. That sounds good.
I would have like 2 or 3. I would go to class, and at lunchtime, instead of going to the cafeteria, you know the long driveway to the end of Madeira? Yeah. If you go up and back and up and back, that's a mile. I would do it 5 times, running it. Yeah.
So no lunch?
If I could squeeze lunch in, I'd be so hungry I'd devour it, but I'd run. And then after school, I'd go do my sport, tennis or riding. And then I would go home and try and do my homework after all that. And it was just a kind of a bad cycle that started at 15 when I noticed my body changing and felt like I needed to.
Is that the sense of not having control over your body in that changing and being very scared? That
Yeah,
is
and I
not
think,
going-
I actually, for this book, I went to a therapist, which is very not me. And we addressed some of this. Every woman comes to this at a different time in her life, if she does, and a different way. I think for me, it was the fear of not measuring up and the addictive quality of the food that I ate, that I think it wasn't just me. I know my mother said I was undisciplined and it was just me. But I think we've learned a little bit about this food. And I will say that I will not blame just myself. It helps, though, to know how it's engineered and put together to make you almost incapable of not stopping.
But was your mother a good cook? Did she like to cook?
Yes. Beautiful meals. Beautiful meals, wild game, Eastern European meals from Czechoslovakia and from Poland.
And it worked really well, except for the time that she fed roadkill to Pamela
Well,
Harriman.
it was that.
And that it was.
She's a really good cook. She hates the story of the deer in the tub
I
in the
know.
first book.
I know. So she finds a dead deer
there's
on the
no
side of the road, takes it home, and Pamela Harriman comes over for a big dinner, and she cooks it, and everybody compliments her. Who's your caterer? She goes, I don't have a caterer. I found this on the side of the road. The Washington Post actually wrote something in the style section, front page of the style section, Bambi comes to dinner. This is very difficult. I do want to say also, don't feel inadequate that you did an extraordinary job at Madeira teaching Mika French and she wasn't paying attention because
I love French.
Because she also tells the story of how she was talking with Colin Powell at a reception and she just saw the little pigs in the blanket
The
go
hot dogs.
past, the hot dogs, and she said she can't remember what Colin Powell was telling her because she kept wondering, where the hell's he going with a pig in the blanket? Is that a true story,
I have
right?
the most fascinating conversations that I wasn't a part of because I was thinking about food. And honestly, it's funny, but it's not. It really took up so much room in my brain. And I felt...
I agree.
And I felt so bad as a child and even worse as an adult.
And as a mother.
Go give her a hug.
Awful.
All right.
My friend.
All right.
Thank you for everything.
All right. Okay, thank you so much. Next question.
Thank you. I have to say, I loved your morning show. I wish I could get up early enough every morning to watch it, but I'm afraid I'm lazy now that I'm retired and I don't. But anyway, I was just curious about your feelings about pregnancy, considering your tight rein on your eating and how you reacted to it and how you coped with weight gain and because I assume you were bulimic earlier.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. I've had this question before. And actually, becoming pregnant and having children did actually force me to dial back on extreme behavior. A lot of the extreme behavior happened in my 20s. And I felt so lucky to be having a child that I sort of instinctively stopped doing some and let myself a little bit gain weight. I will say I jogged throughout my pregnancy, and I think that's fine. What I don't like is how much I worried about it. I used to be so proud to say that I could put my jeans on after having my first child, and now I'm not so sure. I should have been even thinking about that. I should have been thinking about my first child. So I, if anything, that's a very embarrassing example.
When you say thinking about your first child, you obviously were a great mom, but you talk about how, again...
But if we're going to be honest...
I know. Listen, I'm a politician.
He doesn't like the way
you
this
don't
sounds.
have to be honest. So... I just want you to be we're in Washington, for God's sake. I want you. Let's be a little more exact in your language, because you've talked about this an awful lot. That you talk about robbing yourself of the pleasure. You were a wonderful
That's
mom.
what I'm
You're
talking
responsive,
about.
but the joy of being a mom, you
That's
felt
exactly
cheated.
what I'm saying. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being honest about how pervasive an eating disorder can be. I don't know a more joyful time in one's life than having a perfect baby, a beautiful baby, even if it's crying, like the one wearing the Keep Calm and Carry On t-shirt here. I love babies, and I think I'm so drawn to them because I'm the one who missed out thinking about my jeans or food at any moment during that time. Now, did I not enjoy my babies? I tried my best, and I did, and I love them, and they're beautiful girls. I wish I had let myself a little more. I wish I hadn't thought about worrying about becoming a size 4 again. I had to get back on television. I had to get back to work, and unfortunately, the first step back was losing 25 pounds immediately. So yes, it took up time and room in my brain. And I feel very bad about that. I struggled with it. It's why I'm here, and it's why I've written this.
First, I love waking up with you guys, so thank you. Listening to you talk about food many times now, and I think that you've really done a favor and a service to everybody to know what's happening in the brain, and it's not just them, and it's not because they're weak that they're eating. But I haven't heard what you do about it. For me, one of the things that I read once which clicked was, you're not helping the people in Africa by eating it. You would be helping yourself if you threw it out. And I learned to throw out, if I had company, the whole pie, because even if I put it in the freezer, I will be eating it frozen. And it was better off out in the
Out of the
bin.
house, yeah.
And I would love to hear you give people ideas.
Yes,
as to
this
what
book
to
is
do.
full of ideas, and they're real, and they're really hard. Because that's what it is. Really hard to address these problems, but it's totally possible. And we address obesity, and this honesty, Joe, and this sort of admission of what would seem like undisciplined behavior, it runs both sides of the spectrum. I think people look at Chris Christie or my friend Diane Smith before she lost over 75 pounds, and they judge them for wasting their time eating or, being undisciplined or being a slob. And I'm just telling you right now that on both sides of this, there's extreme behavior that is backed up by really, really, really frightening science that shows that our food is laced with toxins that are making us fat or respond to being fat in a very, very sick way, which is what I was doing. And we talk to not only experts about what's in our food so we can understand what it is we're eating and why we're drawn to more of certain things as opposed to others that are better for us, but we also talk to a lot of women and some men about how they have dealt with their body image issues or how they've kept it under control or what their solutions are. And the thing is, your solution will be completely different than mine. So we show an array of ideas, and they're fascinating. The people I talk to, and some of them, are fantastic, and really healthy, wonderful people who I really
Susie
didn't-
Essman
Oh my God, I
is
love her.
hilarious.
She's from the show Curb Your Enthusiasm. And there's some great stories in there from Gayle King and the late Nora Ephron, who spoke to me about this 3 weeks before she passed away. And again, I agree with what you're doing, but read the book to see what other people are doing, and maybe you'll latch on to some other ideas as well.
So how did Diane lose 75 pounds after she'd been on every diet?
Every single diet known to
Every
man.
single diet known to man.
She did the last medical step before the surgery that Chris Christie got a few weeks ago. And it was basically a medically controlled diet that started with just protein shakes that were created literally in the doctor's office for several weeks and then brought back into food that was very highly controlled. She had a hip replacement in the middle of all this while helping write this book. It's amazing what she's done.
It is amazing. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. So you talk a lot about your family in this. So I was wondering what their reaction is to the book.
Right.
And if they themselves.
They have no idea she wrote the book.
Yeah.
They really
They're self-consumed.
And if.
No,
Dr.
my
Brzezinski
dad,
will say, a book, have you read my latest book? Dr. Brzezinski actually makes Mika buy the
His
books that we promote on our show.
So we had a book party at the Bradleys for my first book, and my parents came, and they were like, my father literally, I think, said to you, I'm at a book party for my daughter. Like, it was stunning to him. But no, they actually, I didn't really tell them about this, mostly because I just...
You didn't really tell them?
I didn't, and I
we actually
think it's part of thinking they're not gonna
invited
think-
Dr. Brzezinski over here 5
We just
minutes
called
before because we knew he couldn't make it.
I'm scared. My mother was in Sweden visiting my brother, who works there now, and she was given a copy of my book by my sister-in-law, and she texted me and said, "Your mother's reading your book." I'm scared to death.
Mika was up in Maine on summer vacation when she did the first book, All Things at Once. And actually, Mika was so scared of her mother reading the transcript of the book that she actually rented another house for her family so she could just keep the transcript. Mrs. Brzezinski breaks into the house, sort of in a Mark Sanford move, and she goes in. She gets the transcript. She takes it back over to the family home, and Mika finds it the next day thrown on her floor, and there are red lines through every page. Lies, lies, all lies.
She's over it now.
She's
So
over it.
We're good.
They are very supportive, but there
their
is
own
no
special way.
answer to that question because Mika's still afraid. And isn't this fascinating? Seriously, she's still afraid to talk to her parents about
This
the
one
book.
was scary for me.
Yeah.
Hi, Joe and Mika. I have to tell you, I've been watching the show since the very, very beginning, and I'm an Upper West Sider. Yes. But I moved to New York originally to go to school, but I'm a performer. I became a rockette at 17, was on a Broadway show at 22. In the midst of all of that, suffered from an eating disorder for 12 years from 15 to 27. When I was done, I was done. And I don't think I've ever been so happy to reach 30 and to come into a much better place in life because of all those things. I would get hired. They would say, we're going to hire you. We love you, but you have to lose 5 pounds by the time we stop. And being on TV and having the pressure of 10 pounds from the camera.
Yeah.
So after I went through that, it became about a journey of how am I going to eat for health instead. And the last couple of years, I've been really interested in the fact of I do believe it's all about fresh everything, and the preservatives. It is poison.
Yeah.
So my biggest thing right now is, have you seen the HBO documentary Weight of a Nation?
Yes, it's fantastic.
Having fresh food in public school system and not taking away exercise.
Right. That's I
So-
mean, I am appalled that we have a country that, first of all children are supposed to be educated. I don't understand why we don't celebrate the same philosophy that they should all be entitled to a good meal. And I don't know why we have created a situation where it's hard to make that happen, or almost impossible for some children. Because, I mean, you look at some of the schools in this country and what they feed the kids, and I know we've come a long way, thanks to Michelle Obama in part. But it's still not very even close to healthy. I mean, the food needs to be fresh. The food needs to not be processed. It needs not to be loaded with carbs. I mean, this is all kind of basic stuff, but the bottom line is this is why we are here today, why we are suffering from obesity, because our food has been laced with all the wrong things, and it's been all the foods that's easiest for us to get. That's been the closest to us, the most accessible. It's going to take a long time to get where we need to go. I'm really happy for you.
Yes.
That you stopped. And I get questions from really young women, a friend of ours' daughter who's
Right.
suffering, and when she sends me long emails talking about her eating disorders, I beg her to just stop and enjoy her life. She's beautiful. I wish I could have done that. I wish I would have saved 30 years. I mean, there's not an easy solution, but it's so great to rid yourself of that tyranny.
Let's bring up right now Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary Bill
We could
Sack.
ask some questions right now about that. Why not?
Come on up. Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for being here. We've actually talked about this with you before. We were very honored to celebrate to celebrate the anniversary. What was the 150th anniversary of the Department of Agriculture? And you actually talked about, and we had other people talking about the importance of making sure that kids have good meals in schools. And so where are we with that? And just share with them some of the things you've shared with us in the past.
Well, first of all, I'm really here as an individual who sort of struggled with the same kind of issues that you did.
Well, tell us about that really quickly.
I started out life in a Catholic orphanage, and the only thing I know about my first few days on life is that I was well fed, because the picture when I was adopted was a very plump child. My parents told me that they went into the orphanage and they were looking for the healthiest child they could find, and they figured the plumpest kid there was the healthiest child. But my adopted mom, had problems with alcohol and prescription drug addiction, and I ate my way through that process, and my parents tried to deal with my weight by shaming me. They put cartoons on the refrigerator door. So when I heard your story the other day when you were talking about it on the show, I thought, well, I need to come here not to talk about this, but just to recognize that I hear what you're saying. As far as the kids of America are concerned, we did something 2 years ago. We passed the Healthy, Hungry, Free Kids Act. The First Lady was obviously very, very key to this, and it's my department's responsibility to take care of this and to implement it. The first thing we did is we went to the experts and we said, what should a healthy meal look like? And they came back, and as Mika suggested, a lot less salt, a lot less sugar, and a lot less fat, a lot more fruits, a lot more vegetables, a lot more whole grains, a lot low-fat dairy. We created a calorie structure that is quality and good, and we are now in the process of providing additional resources to schools so that they can indeed embrace better food. And schools across the country are doing this. I was down in Louisiana just the other day. There's an extraordinary company, MMI, that's taking, we had a program called Chefs Move to School, in which the First Lady invited chefs to go into schools and said, here's the reimbursement level, what would you do with it? It is amazing what these folks are doing. This food was spectacular that these kids are getting down in New Orleans. It's absolutely spectacular. Very good, very wholesome. We also have a farm to school program where we're bringing, fresh produce, fruits and vegetables into a school, and we're also encouraging kids to get into their own gardens, school gardens. And Joe, to your point on the whole issue of physical activity, we've combined with the NFL and the dairy folks for their Fuel Up to Play 60 program, encouraging kids to have 60 minutes of activities. And it's absolutely essential that schools reinstitute physical education and activity into the curriculum. So I apologize for taking the
Mr. Secretary, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. That was wonderful of you. Wonderful of you, Mr. Secretary, to come and share that personal story with us. I do want to say, because we are talking, Mika, about food and children eating too much. I just want to follow up on what the Secretary said, because we saw what they're doing with the NFL. I really quickly, could you tell the story? Because again, we've lost that emphasis that we had, that JFK started with the presidential fitness program back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. You had an interesting conversation with a good friend of ours that runs Harlem Village Academy, a school that we went up, and we were just blown away. This is a remarkable charter school. They have erased in so many categories the gap. It's in New York State, they call it the Harlem-Scarsdale gap. And they bring in kids they bring in kids that are 3 grades behind on reading and math, and when they leave, they're actually on par or doing better than kids in the wealthiest suburbs in the state. But Mika, after 2 years of us going up there, and of you working with these children, and me working with the children, and your daughter's working there on the weekend, you started noticing something about the kids, and you had a real heart-to-heart with Deborah Kinney. And what did you tell her?
Well, I told her these kids are getting an education, which gives them a promise, but if they're obese, then they still don't have the opportunity that they need in life. They were, by the way, about 3/4 of them struggled with obesity. And we're actually working on trying to get a program started there. And some of the kids that I'm working with of going to the gym with them and things like that to sort of increase awareness. But it is really, if you want to give a child promise in life, they've got to be able to step up physically. And we're not there yet. And I once again want to thank Secretary Vilsack for telling us his own story. It actually gives me hope that someone in that type of a leadership position has that insight into the problem that our country faces, because to try and fix our school systems and the food that's available to the children in this country, it's a monumental process. It's not going to happen overnight. Get to a couple
Last
more
question,
questions?
and then we're told we have to wrap it up. Why don't you give us a mic? We've got a 3-hour show. We can go on all day. Seriously. All day, as you know. In fact, I want to tell you all a story right after this.
Stop.
About when I was in
take a
Congress.
question.
Go ahead.
Hey, it's great to see you guys. It's great to have you back in Washington. Snacking and weight gain has been very prominent in my family. My brother and sister battled with it many, many years, and the only reason I was able to stave it off is because I was a smoker. I quit.
Okay, good.
I just quit.
So hard.
I just quit. So what I'm wondering is, how do you control those urges to plow through a bag of potato chips?
Right. No.
and-
Okay. Good. Thank you. Great question. First of all, those urges are not going to go away. They're going to get so much worse, and and understand that. And when you feel it, you really, now listen. You can go in opposite direction. And when I went through therapy with this book, I was actually diagnosed with yet another eating disorder, orthorexia nervosa, which meant I controlled what I ate too much and I ate too well. Really? I almost didn't. I didn't continue with it. I was so frustrated, but there actually is a point there, because you can, as women called control freaks, it's the one thing we can control. You obviously are going to have to really work on the amount of food that you need to eat. And one of the interesting things you can take away from this book are different ideas as to how to get there. One idea is retrain your taste buds, and it takes about 2 or 3 weeks to make that happen. So understand you're going to have 3 really tough weeks, and then it might get a little easier. But you have to pace yourself, and don't overdo your expectations, and figure out where to let yourself go a little bit and make it a realistic process. There are other ideas too. So find one that works for you, but understand that this will be very, very hard. Very hard. But you can do it. It's not going to be easy.
Thank you, Mika, for coming here and talking
Thank
about your
you.
book. I appreciate it. Thank you all so much, and thanks for waking up early every morning watching us. We really appreciate it.